little friends. I'm Bunny Doo. Do you love fairy tales as much as I do? Then let's get started. Today we are going to read the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel. If you like the story, little friends, maybe join my channel. Once upon a time, at the edge of a faraway green forest, there lived a woodcutter and his 2 children in a small cottage. The children's mother had passed away years ago after a long illness. Their father tried to raise them all by himself for a long time, but it was hard to work and take care of his children at the same time. One day, he married a hard-working woman to help him. The woman didn't like the woodcutter's children very much. She always grumbled, saying, "This house is too crowded. We'd live more comfortably without the children." Her husband felt sad whenever he heard this, but he stayed quiet. He loved his children dearly and always wanted to keep them safe. Hansel was a mischievous but clever boy, and Gretel was a kind and careful girl. They helped their father and often went to the forest with him. Their father sold the wood he cut to earn their living. Even though they were poor, every evening they sat by the fire, sang songs, and laughed together. One morning, their father said, "Today I'll go to the forest to cut a big tree." "Can we come with you, Father?" asked the children. He smiled and patted their heads. "All right, but you mustn't wander away from me." Gretel quickly packed some food in a basket, and Hansel polished his father's axe. Their stepmother watched them quietly from afar and muttered, "Maybe this time they'll stay away for a while, and we'll have some peace." The forest was so big that it was impossible for the children to find their way home without their father. Gretel always filled her pockets with little white stones and dropped them along the way so she could find the path home. Together, they walked into the bright morning forest. The birds chirped on the branches, and sunlight danced through the leaves. After a while, their house was no longer in sight. When they reached an old, dry tree, their father began chopping wood. Hansel and Gretel played nearby, chasing each other and laughing. But before they knew it, they had wandered far away. When evening came, they looked for their father, but he was nowhere to be found. Hansel worried about how they would get home, while Gretel began looking for the stones she had dropped earlier. "I found one!" she whispered to herself, then shouted to her brother, "Don't worry, I know the way home." As the moonlight shone on the forest, the little stones sparkled and showed them the path. After a long walk, they reached their cottage. Their father cried with joy when he saw them. "I thought I had lost you. Please never wander away again," he said, hugging them tightly. A few days later, their father woke up early again and took his axe. Hansel and Gretel quickly got ready to go too. In her hurry, Gretel forgot to collect the stones. On the way, she thought of another idea. She tore small pieces of bread from the loaf and whispered, "I'll drop breadcrumbs instead of stones." Hansel nodded and smiled. As they walked deeper into the forest, their house grew far behind them. While their father worked, the children played and followed little animals among the trees. when the sun began to set, they tried to find their father, but couldn't. As the forest grew darker, they looked for the breadcrumbs, but all the tiny forest birds had eaten them. They couldn't find their way home at all. Oh dear! The hungry little birds ate all the bread. How will they ever find their way home now? When night fell, strange sounds came from among the trees. Seeing that Gretel was frightened, Hansel bravely held her hand. "Don't be afraid, sister. We'll find our way home," he said. They walked and walked until it was nearly morning. Then, deep in the forest, they saw a house. As they came closer, they couldn't believe their eyes. It was a tiny house with walls made of candy and a roof made of cookies. "It looks so delicious," said Gretel. Hansel touched a corner and took a little bite. "It is delicious," he laughed. The children began nibbling on the wall. Just then, the door creaked open. An old woman stepped outside and said gently, "Sweet children, are you hungry? Come in, and I'll give you warm milk." The children were shy, but they were tired and hungry. So the old woman gave them milk, honey cakes, and apple slices. After eating, they fell asleep in soft, warm beds that smelled of cinnamon. The old woman loved children very much, but didn't like living alone. No one ever knocked on her door. Yet, she baked cakes and cookies every day, hoping someone would come. She had even decorated her home with candy and cookies, so that maybe one day the sweet smell would lead someone to her door. She didn't want Hansel and Gretel to leave. "Stay here with me," she said kindly. Every morning she made milk and fresh cakes for them. But after some time, Hansel and Gretel began to miss their father very much. One day, Gretel whispered to her brother, "We must go home to father." They didn't want to make the old woman sad, but they knew they had to go. One morning, while she was watering the flowers in the garden, they quietly left the house and walked into the forest. Their hearts were full of fear and hope. They tried to find their way through the trees. Their father had been searching for them day after day. He checked every path and corner of the forest. Even when he was tired, he didn't lose hope. Every night, he looked up at the stars and wished, "Please, let them come home safely." One day, while he was searching in a quiet part of the forest, he heard voices in the distance. Children's voices. His heart began to race. He followed the sounds and soon saw Hansel and Gretel. "Hansel! Gretel!" he shouted with joy. The children ran as fast as they could and jumped into their father's arms. How sweet they are! Seeing them run into their father's arms makes my heart skip with joy. The woodcutter's eyes filled with tears as he hugged his children. "I'm so happy I found you. I was so worried," he said. Together they started home, walking happily side by side. When his wife saw how joyful he was, she felt sorry for the unkind words she had said before. From that day on, she became gentle and patient with the children. Never again was their home without laughter and love. Every evening, the sound of sweet laughter filled the little cottage by the forest. 3 magic apples fell from the sky. One for those whose hearts are full of love. One for those who follow their dreams. And one for the little friends listening to this story. See you again next time for another magical tale.